I'm Orlando Bailey of Outlier Media and Authentically Detroit.
And I'm Jer Stays of Daily Detroit.
Detroit, we've got something special coming up that you won't want to miss.
That's right, Orlando. At 10 a.m. on Sunday, June 21st, we're bringing together Detroit's mayoral candidates for an in-depth community forum right in the heart of the East Side.
This isn't your typical candidate event. We're talking real issues, real solutions, and real talk about Detroit's future.
Join us at the East Side Community Network at 4401 Connor Street in Detroit from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
We'll be joined by my Authentically Detroit co-host and community leader, Donna Givens-Davidson, to moderate this important discussion.
Space is limited, so make sure to RSVP through the Eventbrite link in our show notes. Oh, and on that form, there is a spot for your voice to be heard to help shape our questions and the conversation.
That's right. Whether you're a longtime resident or new to the city, come by ECN on June 21st. It's your chance to hear directly from the candidates who want to lead Detroit.
I know how much Daily Detroit listeners love our parks and trails. Our city and our region has been investing a lot more in them as of late, and one of the key players in that is the Ralph C. Wilson Foundation. As part of the legacy of businessman and former Buffalo Bills owner Ralph C. Wilson, $100 million was put to work in Metro Detroit starting back in 2018 in two major focus areas. $50 million for West Riverfront Park, which is about to be completed as Ralph C. Wilson Centennial Park, and $50 million to help make connections and eliminate gaps in the growing regional trail systems. Plus, more money to help pay for the maintenance and care of these spaces going forward. Today's conversation is all about the work that's happening from the foot of Rosa Parks Boulevard in Detroit all the way to Pontiac. I'm Jer Stays, and this is your Daily Detroit for Monday, June 9th, 2025. Thanks to our members on Patreon for making this possible. Patreon.com/Daily Detroit. Thanks to Chris, Sean, Joe, and Andrew for joining us at Patreon.com/Daily Detroit. Let's hop into the conversation. Feedback, as always, dailydetroit@gmail.com. Joining me here at the table at the Mackinac Policy Conference is JJ Tighe, the Senior Director of the Parks and Trails Initiative at the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. Welcome to the show, and man, what a title. I think I'm going to use it once from here on out. You're JJ.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so much work that Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation is doing. Let's start with the genesis of this. So why invest in this in particular? What was the vision behind that?
Well, I think it starts with our North Star at the foundation, right, which is to improve quality of life across the region. And whether it be the park or these trails that we're investing in all across the region, it really does improve quality of life. It's about the parks and the trails, but it's about how they connect communities, how they connect people at a very basic level. Their transportation alternatives and the economic development that thrives around these spaces that ultimately drives that improved quality of life because people want to live next to these spaces and in our community, which ultimately gets to the point where people want to live here. It's an asset for the state, for the region, and for companies to attract and retain talent in our region.
There's a lot of attention on the West Riverfront Park, right? But and we'll talk about it for a bit, but there's more to things than that, right?
Absolutely. Our commitment back in 2018 was for the Riverfront Park. It was a lead gift there. But then beyond that, we're eliminating gaps and trails all over the region. So whether it be the Downriver Link Greenway, which connects 18 downriver communities and connects to the Joe Louis Greenway in Detroit, the Joe Louis Greenway itself that connects neighborhoods down to the riverfront, the bridge to bay up in St. Clair that connects Port Huron and St. Clair, or even the lake to lake that's Wixom, Walldale, Commerce Township, and will soon go through the city of Pontiac and bring all of those recreational riders and walkers and communities into downtown Pontiac.
That's a pretty extensive reach because I think so often, at least in the wider conversation, it really is focused just on the city.
Yeah.
But there is so much. So let's talk about those projects a little bit. So what is that out there along the lakes? What is that project going to look like?
Bridge to Bay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Bridge to Bay is an initiative that started in 2017 with the St. Clair Community Foundation, where they're listening to the community, figuring out what they want and how to connect their towns along the river. But then how does that really affect the local businesses, the ice cream shops, the restaurants, the theater that are there, and how does it connect to downtown Port Huron? And our role is to work with St. Clair Community Foundation based upon the vision that was created by the community to fill those gaps. And we provide design and engineering funding. We provide match funding for capital grants that come from the state and federal agencies, and really trying to bring that vision to reality.
So when you think about your work as a foundation, is it really the idea to like kind of get these things started so that then they start to get momentum of their own?
I think when I look at the trail piece, a lot of these have had momentum for years. Look at the example in Pontiac. That's been on the drawing board for 15 or 20 years. It's really hard and really expensive. Eliminating that gap and connecting those communities is what we're about. And given the resources and the gift that Mr. Wilson has entrusted us to do, we're able to go at the really hard ones. Another example is down in Dearborn, where there's going to be a new trail that goes under Michigan Avenue that connects the Henry Ford College down to the multimodal facility and then connects down to the Lower Rouge. How do we get at those really hard ones that folks always say, well, we'll get to that later?
I wanted to ask you about the environmental piece as well, like the importance of this tying into things like climate adaptability, because that's a whole nother piece. Climate is changing. You can even see it with more flooding, more things like that. How does all this play into those changes too?
I think it's something that's always part of the equation. I think every one of the public space projects that we have, we think about green infrastructure, water capture. None of these projects are going to solve that problem in and of themselves, but everyone can be part of that solution. And with the added trees that will be planted in Riverfront Park or the raised elevation will have capability to absorb more water and protect it from a higher water level. So it's always top of mind, and it's always part, and we provided incremental funding to make sure some of those didn't get designed out.
Yeah. Well, why don't we talk about the big daddy of West Riverfront Park? I know a lot of our listeners are going to want to know.
Yeah.
What are you most excited about with that? Because I'll go by and it's like there's like a giant otter, or a bear or whatever, and it's just so fascinating to see. It is truly a visually transformative park where it's look, I love a nice park. I love a good path. I love good boulders and all that other stuff. But you look at this thing and you're like, holy.
Yeah.
It's
amazing. And I'll start with the bear. I was down in the park walking through it last week, and I got to slide down that slide for the first time, and it is amazing. And
now, were you in a suit doing it?
I was not in a suit. But I think it's more than just the park. It starts with the community engagement, with the way the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy had their community action teams listen to the community, some of the youth that helped literally draw some of those slides that are now coming to fruition. It's a pretty amazing engagement that started in 2015 or 2016 and still goes on. Their last community meeting they just had about a month ago. What I'm also proud about is two other things. One, it's not just about the park, but it's about accessibility to the park. You look at how the Joe Louis Greenway is. You start with the riverfront as kind of the leg on the river of the Joe Louis Greenway. The projects that we help support with Riverfront Towers, the new boardwalk that will be the physical and symbolic connection to the existing Riverwalk that'll open here in a couple of months, or the Southwest Greenway that connects up to Michigan Central. Those are projects that don't necessarily get as much visibility, but essential to making sure that the park is successful and that the community can access it. I think the other piece is the elephant in the room with some of the things that have happened over the last year is that
I was going to ask about it.
The park is going to open on time. They did not miss a beat, and I'm very proud to be part of an organization that when things like that happen, the trustees were willing to step up, and our leadership was willing to step up and fill some significant gaps to make sure that the Riverfront Conservancy did not miss a beat, and we're going to open on time that park to the community in October.
Yeah, I know listeners are buzzing about it. One thing that I like about the connective pieces, as a longtime city resident, I think about that area right over there by the Riverfront Towers and over by the old, where Joe Louis used to be and everything else, and how much it felt like a wall, right? A parking lot or a fences. And it just didn't feel very much like a city. It felt like I was in an industrial area with apartments. It was really weird. So being able to see that connection is huge.
And it's ready to go. And the reason it's not open And I know there's been some reporting about the one connector trail that comes up to Jefferson there not being open. But the reason it's not open is because right now on that Riverfront Towers boardwalk, it's a dead end. And so getting any sort of emergency services out there in a dead end or putting people stranded out there at that dead end is just not a viable thing. So they're ready to open it up, and it's just a matter of the park being done and then that whole thing opening up. And I think everybody's going to be very excited about it when it does.
Yeah. So how much farther do we have to go with the West Riverfront Park? What is ahead here? What's our timeline?
If you go down and look at that, you'll go, there's no way that's going to open in October, but it will. Jefferson's torn up, and they're really doing that to slow traffic. So, if it's curved as it goes, so cars and trucks speed through there. So they're literally straightening that, putting signal lights, putting a pedestrian crossing to the Southwest Greenway. The park itself, the water feature with Huron-Clinton Metro Parks and the EPA, they're done. They're done with that. The playground is virtually done except for the poured-in-place kind of rubberized surface that will allow kids to go and enjoy that. The vast majority of the work that's left is kind of the icing on the cake. It's all the landscaping work, and it's going to be beautiful. I mean, I think they have over 500 trees that have been planted in the last few weeks. All the shrubs, all of that stuff that typically is the last to go in. But in this case, with the Michael Van Valkenburg Design Park, it's the most important element. That's what people are going to experience.
Yeah, and I think, it's very easy for the public to look at something and be like, oh, it's all tore up. But It's laying all those foundations because wasn't there like a lot of work to be done with that? Because I remember going there for some festivals and things, and it's like I was partying in a swamp.
Well, I think the best way to describe it is, remember, that used to be an old rail yard. And so it's flat, and you have all that old infrastructure that was there on the old industrial riverfront, right? And so all of that has been removed, and it was a lot of work, a lot of years in the making for that. But what's going to be there is going to be climate resilient, and it's going to be an amazing experience for kids in the city of Detroit.
I think about that old rail yard, and I also think about the spaces that were east of the Rensen, and I think about how many of our listeners weren't even alive for that.
Right.
Like I remember as a kid, like the SEMTA train that would come down by the Rensen, and it's like it's so transformed that you wouldn't even know, except for the fact that like the DeQuinder Cut existed and it was a rail yard or a rail line.
Just a short personal story is I moved here 15 years ago to Detroit, and the first thing, we came over the Ambassador Bridge, and we were like, let's check out the riverfront, and that was an eye-opening experience. It wasn't what it is today. What the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy and all their partners in the city of Detroit have done is just simply amazing in a very short amount of time. And soon in October, you'll be able to go from the central train station to Ralph Wilson Park, through Waterfront Towers, all the way down to the old Uniroyal site and onto Belle Isle, and get around the Ralph Wilson Loop Trail that takes people off the roads and on Belle Isle to all those amenities too. It'll be truly an amazing experience.
So as West Riverfront Park gets wrapped up, kind of what are you looking ahead to? As I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, like the idea of the foundation is to spend and do projects, right? Not to try to stick around forever, but to deploy the capital.
For the Parks and Trails work, we are a spend down foundation. We've got 9 years, 7 months, and a few days left till I'm out of a job. But the biggest piece for us is all these investments we've made. What's not visible is some of the intentional grants that the trustees have put out there for endowments to make sure these spaces are going to be just as good the day we cut the ribbon 20 years from now. And it doesn't solve all of those issues, but we're putting money aside to make sure these spaces will live beyond the foundation.
That's so crucial. I think about the issues that the city had over the years with parks. I think about I had the people who put together the Udolph Garden together over on Belle Isle. A key part of that was an endowment so that could be taken care of, because if you make this beautiful thing but you don't have money for ongoing maintenance, it can go sideways real fast.
Absolutely. And it's also, we talked about it a little bit earlier on a panel today, it's also investing in the leadership. Right now in the city of Detroit, in this region, we have some amazing nonprofit leaders that are listening to the community, and they're building that vision, and then they're going to make it happen. We continue to invest in that leadership and getting these projects done, and then making sure they're sustainable and making sure they continue the conversation with the community as these spaces evolve, because they're never done, and making sure that we continue to listen.
Well, right, because as it gets used, you're going to learn new things. At least I've learned this in business and in creating content. As you create one thing, you're going to be like, oh, well, this should have been this way, or maybe we need this additional thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And a park, the day it opens, or the Joe Louis Greenway, the day it opens, it's probably the least attractive because the trees haven't grown, the shrubs haven't grown in. Folks will use certain elements and they won't use others. And you have to continue to listen, understand what the community wants, and then those spaces will continue to evolve.
So what are you most excited about as far as your piece of things over the next 9 years and change before you don't have a job?
I just look back and, I feel very fortunate to be a little part of getting to be involved with projects all across the region. We have tremendous leaders that are doing the work. These are going to be tremendously impactful projects. West Riverfront Park, now Ralph Wilson Park, is going to rival Maggie Daley in Chicago or Brooklyn Bridge Park in New York. And I'm excited for what that will mean for the city of Detroit and for the region.
Yeah, for sure. Well, JJ Tighe, Senior Director of the Parks and Trails Initiative at the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. I figured out how to say the whole title yet again. Thank you so much for stopping by at Daily Detroit. I appreciate everything you're doing.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the time.
And we are done for today. A favor before I go, please tell a friend about the Daily Detroit podcast. Seriously, you all talking about the show really does help grow the project. So follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to shows. I'm Chair Stays. Thank you so much for listening. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll talk tomorrow.